Welcome to the history of boxing in New Orleans. Boxing an easy sport to understand. The rules are few and fairly straightforward. Two men enter a square ring standing toe-to-toe, with nowhere to go but face each other, and with only their fists and their courage to determine the outcome. The basic strategy of boxing is twofold. Either hit your opponent enough times without being hit yourself, so as to win on points, or you hit your opponent enough times until he can't continue. It has been this way since the times of the ancient Greeks and Romans. One measure of how important and popular boxing was to Americans is to look at how we have absorbed its terminology of part of our lexicon. The adoption of boxing terms into the idiomatic expressions of American culture are second only to baseball. These are but a few of the most common examples of expressions that we use every day without giving it a second thought, some more popular than others. Now bear in mind that prize fighting or boxing was illegal in most states, including Louisiana. But early fights still took place. For instance, on May 5th, 1837, an Englishman, James Burke, met Irishman Sean O'Rourke outside of the city of New Orleans. At some point in the third round, one of O'Rourke's seconds came too close to Burke and received a blow from Burke himself, leading to an all-out skirmish involving fists, sticks, and other weapons. Burke escaped on horseback, but the mayhem continued when both sides returned to the city. The mayor had to call out the Washington Guard to restore order. Incidents like this in no way diminished the popularity of boxing or the frequency of matches. They continued to be staged on the outskirts of the city, just beyond the reach of the police whenever possible. New Orleans has always had a reputation as a, quote, wide-open city where anything goes. So it's no surprise that New Orleans fell under the gaze of the reigning British heavyweight champion, Jem Mace. In 1870, there was no regulatory body to declare a unified boxing champion. At the time, 3 Americans each claimed the heavyweight title: Tom Allen, Mike McCool, and Joe Goss. The British champion Mace chose New Orleans as the venue to settle the matter once and for all, and offered to meet each American in alphabetical order. So it fell to Tom Allen to face Mace first in May 1870, but when the police caught wind of the fight, everyone, fighters, seconds, and fans, rode the Jackson Railroad to the rail depot on the Oakland Plantation in Kennerville. Mace dispatched Allen in 10 rounds that lasted 44 minutes, and thus the first World Heavyweight Championship title was awarded in New Orleans. With the drubbing of Allen, neither McCool nor Goss threw their hats into the ring against Mace. The next major event to take place in New Orleans was another world heavyweight match. In 1882, the reigning world champion was an Irishman named Paddy Ryan, who had won the title from Joe Goss 2 years earlier in West Virginia. Ryan was born in Tipperary, Ireland, but came to America and settled in Troy, New York. Challenger John L. Sullivan came to New Orleans from Boston, where he had gained a reputation as a ferocious boxer. The two arrived in New Orleans on February 6, 1882. But when Louisiana Governor Samuel McHenry got wind of the fight, everything was once again relocated, this time to Mississippi City, near present-day Gulfport. There, in the side yard of the Barnes Hotel, a ring was hastily erected and the fight was underway at 11:45 in the morning. Despite the noonday heat, Sullivan defeated Ryan in 9 rounds that only lasted 11 minutes. John L. Sullivan was the new world heavyweight champion. This was the last time that Sullivan would be listed as the challenger in any boxing match. 7 years later, Sullivan would take on challenger Jake Kilrain of Baltimore. And once again, the fight had to be moved from New Orleans, when Governor Francis T. Nichols heard of the fight and sent the state militia to New Orleans to stop it. The fighters and fans took 2 different trains that left New Orleans from 2 different terminals. Both the Louisiana and the Mississippi State Militia were hot on their trail. With planned diversions and track changes, the 2 trains converged at Richburg just outside of Hattiesburg at 8:30 in the evening. The next morning, everything was ready. Stands were constructed and the ring set up. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, the bout was underway. By agreement, rounds were to last 1 minute with a 50-second break between rounds. After 75 rounds lasting 2 hours and 18 minutes, Kilrain's corner threw in the sponge before the start of the 76th round. Referee John Fitzpatrick, who would later be elected mayor of New Orleans, declared Sullivan the winner, and none too soon as the authorities were closing in. Everyone beat a hasty retreat to escape the long arm of the law. This would be the last bare-knuckle championship fight in America. But the tide was turning from bare-knuckle and London prize ring rules to the Marquess of Queensberry rules. Boxing was still largely illegal until New Orleans took a bold step. The turning point came in late 1889 and early 1890 when the New Orleans City Council, working in conjunction with the state legislature, crafted new legislation regarding boxing. The key phrase was, "in the rooms of regularly chartered athletic clubs." The intent was to tightly regulate prize fighting. Athletic clubs had a gymnasium where they might erect a boxing ring and could accommodate a couple of hundred members and their guests. No one counted on the ambitious people at the Olympic Club down in the Bywater on Royal Street. Imagine, if you will, a wooden arena that could seat more than 10,000 people, that had a retractable roof, carbon arc and incandescent lights, and was wired for both telephone and telegraph for the international press. That was the arena built in 1890 by the Olympic Club. Now, Jack Dempsey was the nom de guerre of one John Edward Kelly from County Kildare, Ireland, emigrated to Brooklyn, and was working as an apprentice barrel maker when he began boxing. He took the name Jack Dempsey because he didn't want his mother to know he'd been fighting. But fight he did, and within a year he became the world middleweight champion. The challenger was an unknown from Australia named Bob Fitzsimmons. The Olympic Club put up an enormous purse of $12,000 for this fight. In all of Dempsey's previous bouts, the purse ranged from $500 to $3,500. The gamblers had their money on the champ, except in New Orleans, where the locals put their money behind the challenger. Their intuition paid off, as Fitzsimmons defeated Dempsey in 13 rounds, the news of which shocked the world. If New Orleans was famous before, the Olympic Club made it world famous because what they did next astounded everyone in the boxing and sporting world. The Olympic Club announced that their next big event would be a fistic carnival. 3 world championship fights on 3 consecutive days, September 5th through the 7th. Nothing like this had ever been done, and the world took notice. On Monday night, September 5th, the first match between Jack McAuliffe, who had worked with Jack Dempsey in Brooklyn making barrels, against Billy Meyer from Streator, Illinois. McAuliffe won by a knockout in the 15th round. On Tuesday night, September 6th, the second match was groundbreaking. Champion George Dixon was a black man, set to fight challenger Jack Skelly, a white man. But that did not deter the Olympic Club in New Orleans, and the fight was on. Dixon won by a knockout in the 8th round. On Wednesday, September 7th, the third and final bout and the crown jewel of the Fistic Carnival was between the legendary John L. Sullivan and an up-and-coming challenger named James Corbett from San Francisco. That night, there was not a single professional prize fight scheduled anywhere in America. Theaters in New York and Chicago announced that they would provide fight updates between acts to placate anxious husbands. Corbett stunned the boxing world by defeating Sullivan by a knockout in the 21st round. Another memorable fight at the Olympic Club took place on April 6, 1893, between Andy Bowen, a popular local lightweight boxer, and Galveston Jack Burke. When the fight got underway at 9 o'clock at the Olympic Club, no one could imagine what would happen. For 110 regulation rounds over 7 hours and 19 minutes, the two men battled until neither had the energy to fight. Burke had broken most of the bones in both of his hands. This was a fight to the finish. But when neither man could continue, referee John Duffy stopped the fight after 110 rounds and declared the fight to be no contest. To this day, this remains the longest prize fight in American history. No one realized it at the time, but this was the pinnacle of boxing in New Orleans. 2 events conspired to put an end to boxing in New Orleans. The first came from the upstart Crescent City Athletic Club, who offered an incredible $40,000 purse for a match between champion Bob Fitzsimmons and his Australian nemesis Jim Hall. The media hype and trash-talking made this a spectacle from the moment it was announced. The Crescent City Athletic Club had constructed their own massive wooden arena that could accommodate more than 13,000 fans and raised ticket prices to help pay for its cost. Their gamble backfired. Attendance was estimated at between 5,000 to 6,000, and many of these fans had yet to reach their seats when Fitzsimmons knocked out Hall in the 4th round after just 13 minutes. The club did not have the prize money to pay the fighters and had to default. It was a black eye on the New Orleans boxing scene. The second incident that led to the decline of boxing in New Orleans took place more than a year later when Andy Bowen met George "Kid" Levine at the Auditorium Club, the new name for the now defunct Crescent City Athletic Club. In the 18th round, Bowen took a hard blow to the head that knocked him out before he hit the ground. And when he hit the canvas, there was a resounding thud. It was discovered that there was no padding beneath the canvas floor. Bowen was carried off and transported home when he could not be revived, and he died the next morning without ever regaining consciousness. The city and the state suspended all boxing matches indefinitely. Professional boxing began to look elsewhere, and the golden age of boxing in New Orleans came to an end. But that was not the end of boxing in New Orleans. Eventually, the sport of boxing was resumed, and there were a number of world-class boxers who came from New Orleans. We have already touched on the career and tragic end of Andy Bowen, but in the first quarter of the 20th century, several fighters emerged to begin to rekindle interest in the sport. First, there was Pete Herman, followed by Tony Canzoneri. Both became world champions, as indicated by the gold marker. Also listed there is Marty Burke, who trained with Jack Dempsey and was the father of actor Paul Burke. So many other excellent boxers called New Orleans home. With a body more suited to jockey silks than boxing shorts, young Pete Galata worked as a bellhop and as a shoe shine boy in a barbershop. There he learned about boxing from old copies of the Police Gazette. The stories he read about a popular lightweight prizefighter named Kid Herman sparked his interest in boxing and inspired his nom de guerre, Pete Herman. He won the World Bantamweight title on January 1, 1917. Tony Canzoneri secured his place among the boxing elite when he became only the second fighter in history to win world championships in 3 different weight classes: featherweight, 126 pounds, lightweight, 135 pounds, and light welterweight, 140 pounds. He is probably the most successful boxer ever to hail from the New Orleans area, winning 80% of his 171 bouts. Born into poverty in Baton Rouge on May 18, 1926, Joe Brown made his professional debut on January 15, 1943, at Victory Arena against Ringer Thompson, winning the 4-round bout on points. Brown had another 6 fights before he was drafted into the United States Navy during World War II. While in the Navy, Brown captured the All-Service Lightweight Championship before being honorably discharged in 1945. Brown earned his chance for the Lightweight Championship of the World by outpointing the reigning champion, Wallace Bud Smith, on August 24, 1956, in front of his home crowd at the Municipal Auditorium. In all, Brown made 11 successful defenses of his title against 10 boxers and remained champion for almost 6 years. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The hands can't hit what the eyes can't see. This quote is most often associated with boxing legend Muhammad Ali, but Ali borrowed it from his trainer, Angelo Dundee, who used it to describe the first boxer he trained to win a world championship, New Orleanian Willie Pastrano. Pastrano's speed and agility caught the eye of Angelo Dundee, a Miami-based trainer. Dundee approached Pastrano and worked out a management contract that allowed Pastrano to train in New Orleans while attending Warren Easton High School and then train with Dundee at his Fifth Street gym in Miami during the summer. He won the light heavyweight title on June 1, 1963, against Harold Johnson and successfully defended his title twice while compiling a record of 62 wins, 13 losses, and 8 draws for a .7 and 46 winning percentage. Born on October 14, 1935, Ralph Dupas was the second of 11 children of a New Orleans fisherman. He turned to boxing at an early age to escape poverty, falsifying his age in order to get his boxing license. By the time he was 16, he was fighting 10-round main events across New Orleans, sometimes 3 times a month. In 1951 and 1952, he fought 15 times each year, losing just twice, while scoring 2 draws. Legendary trainer Angelo Dundee saw him fight and convinced him to relocate to Miami, Florida, to train. Within 2 years, he had become a ranked contender in the lightweight division. Victories against Armand Savoy, Paddy DeMarco, and Kenny Lane vaulted him into the top ranks of lightweights in the world. The now 27-year-old Dupas moved up to the junior middleweight division to face title holder Denny Moyer on April 29, 1963, at the Municipal Auditorium in New Orleans. More than 5,000 fans saw him pound the title out of Moyer to win the World Boxing Association and World Boxing Council junior middleweight title. He successfully defended his title in a rematch with Moyer on June 17, 1963, in Baltimore, Maryland, winning another 15-round unanimous decision. More recently, Regis Prograis began training at the Savannah Boxing Club in Houston alongside Evander Holyfield after Hurricane Katrina forced him to relocate. He would go on to build a remarkable 87-7 amateur record. He won regional Golden Gloves and competed in the 2012 Olympic trials before turning pro in 2012. In 2015, he won the vacant NABF junior light welterweight title against Abel Ramos, which he followed up with by winning the vacant NABF light welterweight title against Luis Flores. In 2018, he won the vacant WBC interim light welterweight title against Julius Indongo. In 2019, he won the WBA light welterweight title against Kirill Relief. Great boxers need great trainers and promoters. For nearly 50 years, Ernest Whitey Esnote trained neighborhood kids at St. Mary's Italian Gym on Chartres Street in the French Quarter. Chump or champ, it didn't matter to Esnote. He trained them all. New Orleans has had a pivotal role in the sport of boxing over the years and has more recently played host to numerous marquee fights. Here are just a few of them. After his shocking win over Ali to become heavyweight champion, Leon Spinks was stripped of the WBC belt for not facing its #1 ranked contender, Ken Norton. Instead, he agreed to a rematch with Ali. The attendance at the Superdome was 63,350, which at the time was the largest indoor attendance ever for a boxing match. The card contained 3 other world title fights: the WBA Bantamweight Championship, the WBC Featherweight Championship, and the WBA Light Heavyweight Championship. Ali regained the WBA heavyweight title and avenged his split decision loss to Spinks from 7 months prior. He also became the first man to win the World Heavyweight Championship 3 times.
Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran had first fought on June 20, 1980 in Montreal, which Duran won by unanimous decision. The rematch was billed as the Super Fight and took place November 25, 1980 at the Superdome in New Orleans. Leonard used his superior speed and movement to outbox and befuddle Duran. In the closing seconds of the 8th round, Duran turned his back to Leonard and quit, waving his glove and apparently saying to referee Octavio Mayrin, "No mas," meaning no more in Spanish. Leonard was the winner by a technical knockout, TKO, in the 8th round, regaining the WBC welterweight championship. In trying to capture some of the old magic of the Olympic Club of New Orleans, boxing promoter Don King compiled a 10-bout card for the Louisiana Superdome, to be topped off with 3 World Championship matches back-to-back. It was too much, and his plan backfired. Initially, hoping to attract 40,000 to the Superdome in New Orleans, but estimated attendance was just 12,000. About a week before the event, King convinced the boxers to accept purse reductions due to lagging ticket sales. It was a monumental undertaking that still resulted in 3 World Championship fights on the same night. We've heard about many significant boxing matches from 1840 through the present day, involving some of the greatest boxers in history. However, these are only a small part of the colorful history of boxing in New Orleans. There were many more championship fights in the city that should be mentioned and that served to solidify the city's place as a cornerstone of professional boxing. We hope you have enjoyed this look at the history of boxing in New Orleans. For those who would like to learn more about the early history of boxing in New Orleans, please purchase a copy of the Olympic Club of New Orleans through your local bookseller or through Amazon online.